In the invite to this webinar, we said that we would cover the product disruption brick today, which we will. But today's guest, Sofia Graflund, who will soon introduce herself, also has experience from the gigascaling brick. So we figured that we would do a 2-in-1, but we'll focus some more on the product disruption brick. This is not the first webinar we're doing. I don't know if anyone of you here have been to any of the other ones. I figured I would provide some context. Of course, today we'll talk about gigascaling and product disruption. And both of these bricks are the result of a project that we have been running for more than a year called the Climate Brick. And the goal, us and Contrarian Ventures and later McKinsey and 80 or so other investors and founders set out to do, was basically to create the missing manual for scaling climate tech. As investors, we spend most of our time meeting founders like yourself, and we felt from our side of things that too much time had to go into agreeing on basics. Basically, what do you need to raise a seed round, an A round, a B round, and so forth? And then if you extrapolate that, we realize that there's a lot of time that goes into things that are kind of not really productive. So we wanted to remove friction and create basically a common language for everyone around the climate tech table. So that is the Climate Brick. So if you're interested in the project as a whole, go to the website and sign up. Reach out to me or Robina or anyone else if you want to engage. These 2 bricks are 2 out of 7 bricks, and all these bricks represent different archetypical scaling journeys, if you will. So you have bricks for building plants or deploying green assets or what have you. But given that we lost some time, I will not bore you with that, but I will now introduce today's guest, Sofia Graflund. And I'll start with a hopefully easy question. How are you today?
I'm a little bit sweaty, actually, after this. It's really stressful to have technical issues when you know that people are waiting for you.
Yeah.
But I'm great. I'm very great. I mean, it's July and I've been in between jobs since May. So I'm in a very good time of my life. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And we'll talk about your experience at Northvolt and Heart Aerospace soon. But maybe let's start with something more about you. So what's your background? What led you into this world?
Yeah, it's actually a good question. And I have a sort of a mixed background. I'm a lawyer by profession. So I have a legal education from Stockholm University. And I did my first 10 years as a proper lawyer at Vinge Law Firm, working with M&A and mostly with financing. And I did what I thought was proper project finance when I was at Vinge. And I thought I was some sort of an expert, leaving Vinge and joining Northvolt as the general counsel. And the reason why I was selected for that job was because I had this, documented experience about project finance. And it very shortly, showed me that I didn't really knew anything about project finance before joining Northvolt, because the way that and I'm not going to go into the details just now, but the way that the project finance is really conducted and executed in this new green technology world where we're doing gigascaling, it's completely different how it used to be done when I was a lawyer and supporting clients. I mean, there is very few similarities, actually. So I did that for 4 years and was an early joiner with Northvolt, building up the legal compliance and IP department, but mostly working on what we actually call, engineering around the financing. And it's so nice to be a lawyer and say that you work with some sort of engineering, but that's what we did. And one of the biggest novelties with Northvolt is, the technology is already there, so to say. Batteries has been built in especially in Asia for a long time. But what we did was to sort of build the financing for this gigafactory 1 and 2 and 3 in a new way. And we sort of set the blueprint for how many of the other gigafactories, H2 Green Steel and others, are actually doing it the same way as we did. After 4 years, sorry.
What year did you join Northvolt?
When?
Yeah, what year?
And early 2018.
Gotcha. That was early on the journey. And then you
Yeah.
said after 4 years, I cut you off. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Now after 4 years, I mean, then we were almost 3,000 people, and we have moved into sort of a very new kind of company. And I really fancy and get excited about the early stage. So then I was introduced to this new company called Heart Aerospace, which is a little bit in the new space. But if you look at the bricks, Northvolt is really the gigascaling, the gigafactory, and Heart Aerospace is almost, I would say, a blend. Right now, it's a disruptive technology, a new product, but it's also have the element of the hardware element where we actually want to build gigafactories and have airplane assemblies in-house, so to say. So depending on where you are on the timing scale, it will be both, but right now it's the new technology. So I joined Heart Aerospace in 2022. It must have been, 2 years ago, and as the chief operating officer. And that was a completely new role for me, and it was fantastic. It was really interesting, and I would really love to come back with some of the learnings from that, because it's I must say that I think that new product is even more complex than the gigafactoring when it comes to financing and building the new ecosystem around these new products. And in May this year, I left Heart Aerospace for new adventures. So right now I'm between jobs.
Beautiful. And for the record, I'm a partner at EQT Ventures, and we were an early investor in Heart Aerospace. So I am on the board of that company. Not investor in Northvolt, sadly, but that is how the world is. Let's move on and talk a bit about Northvolt and gigascaling, and let's spend a bit less time on that one, because the advertised break to talk about today was obviously product disruption.
Yeah.
So go with me, Sofia. Here is a picture that I stole from the Northvolt webpage.
Yeah.
What are you seeing in the picture? Maybe it's a good start, first question.
So this is the big site in Skellefteå. This is Northvolt 1. This is actually not even covering the expansion. So this is the first 24 gigawatts that we're building. And this was part of what I financed. This cost 40 billion Swedish kronor. And it includes both the upstream, which we actually do, where we do the chemical production of the cathode, and the downstream, which is all the process for actually assembling and shipping the batteries to customers. So this is in Skellefteå.
It's beautiful.
And you can see part of this behind there is the Revolt, which is actually something that I'm really excited about. It's the recycling facilities where, I mean, Northvolt has really high standards on sustainability, and they said that 2030, half of all the raw material going into the batteries is going to be recycled. And that's happening in Revolt, which is the recycling unit.
And during the first Climate Brick meetup we had in October last year, we had Peter Carlson, the founder and CEO of Northvolt, talking about the ups and downs of the journey. And looking at the Climate Brick, the brick that resembles the Northvolt journey the closest is the gigascaling brick. And this brick is for companies building CapEx-intensive large-scale plants for some type of green production. May it be batteries, green steel, and green fuels. And here we have some example companies in the bottom left corner. What I figured we could do is that this is from the report or the deck you can download from the Climate Brick website, minus the background picture. Let's go through and look at the critical unlocks for gigascaling first. There are 3 for different stakeholders. Then we look at the actual brick. But let's look at them and see if we agree and talk a bit about them. So what you should consider if you are a founder. So here it says that as a founder, you should develop and execute a clear roadmap to achieve cost competitiveness compared to peers, and do that early. You should prioritize execution, build a first-of-a-kind plant, and scale rapidly. And then you should ensure take or pay commitment offtakes to unlock non-dilutive funding. So do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds so easy. I mean, of course, this is what you should do as a founder. This is your goal. And I think that what I would like to add into here is to, I mean, of course, prioritize execution, but also to minimize complexity. And that that is so easily said. I mean, like we're talking, I was on an event last week in Copenhagen talking about this. When you build product finance, you really would like to have someone doing the full site, the EPC contract, someone to take full responsibility to give you the production site. And I think that would be the goal for most companies building a gigafactory on a site like this. The problem is that when you're always hitting from below, so to say, you're an underdog. And EPC contracts, they will compound risk and risk and risk on top of each other, which will make the cost really high to go with someone taking that risk. So the way of compounding contracts into a construction site like this, both when it comes to building the actual facilities, but also the production lines, how you can think smart around that. So the company yourself as a founder and as a team, that you don't stand alone with the interfaces between different providers, if it's suppliers of equipment, or if it's the supplier of electricity or installation or actually construction or groundwork infrastructure, etc. Because that is something that we were fighting a lot with our lenders, how can we build the best contract structure to minimize the interfaces that Northvolt needs to stand? And that is extremely difficult in a complex structure like Northvolt or H2 Green Steel or everyone building huge sites like this. So I would like to add that as a founder to consider.
So there's no more room on the slide, so we cannot add it. Just kidding. As an investor, I don't think that is super relevant here, but I am an investor. So but it could also be interesting if you're a founder, kind of to jump into the head of the person on the other side of the table. What we see here is basically the same thing as written under founder, but from the other side of the table. And then as a policymaker, it says pre-approve regulatory land requirements for sites to facilitate rapid scaling, which I guess makes sense. Here we have the actual brick. The text is pretty small. It was interesting during the process when we developed these bricks, the text got kind of smaller and smaller. So what I will do now is that I will switch over to a PDF version of this so we can zoom a bit. So I do that now, and then I open up the gigascaling brick on my computer. Then what I do is that I share the screen again. Here we go. So here we have the gigascaling brick, hopefully on everyone's screen. And also wary of that we were late, so let's not spend all the time on this one. But maybe let's start by having a look at the critical unlocks up in the top right corner. And what you see here is basically a summary of what we had on the previous slide. And these critical unlocks you see marked blue down here, so they're kind of spread out across the journey. Then on the dimension side, we have the financing dimension. We'll come back to commercial, product and offering, technology, value chain, ecosystem, and execution. I will zoom out again. So when at the Northvolt journey did you join, Sofia? Like on this map here?
The thing is that with Northvolt, we didn't follow this sort of regular way of funding. So we did the partnership round with some of the industrial companies like Scania, ABB, and some others, which we used for building our demonstration factory in Västerås. And then we actually jumped directly to the full financing of the project. And that was a big challenge, but it was also the only way that we could unlock the non-dilutive, which is the project finance from the banks, the commercial banks, that we had the equity committed for the full first factory. So we didn't follow this at all. So I would say that I joined somewhere. I joined during the partnership round, and to be honest, I don't really see exactly where that would fit in here.
Probably somewhere here. And interestingly, we will see. We have actually created we have on the ClimateTech website. We created we call it pioneer case for Northvolt. So we will see it's not really done, and we'll see exactly when we get there. But pretty soon we will have kind of like a Northvolt case plopped into this template.
Yeah.
Before, and we're out of time now also, because I guess some people might have to join at a quarter two. So we have another 15 minutes, and we want to squeeze in some Q&As. But like any kind of like reflections or tips on the gigascaling brick before moving over to the product disruption one?
I mean, the key enabler was, of course, as you have marked here as the unlock, was the offtake customers. And I think that, you know, that market demand, and it was the perfect momentum in Europe at the time to build battery factories, because Europe wanted to secure their own supply chain of batteries. But not to be forgotten, because I think everyone is focusing so much on the offtake contract, which is the base for, of course, for the big financing. But we wouldn't have been able to secure this financing if we didn't also work a lot on the supply chain. I mean, the critical raw material, it's a problem in Europe. We don't produce it as much ourselves as we need it. So for us, it was, I would say, as important to also secure the supply chain, both the capex, all the production lines, but in particular when you have critical raw material, that you focus as much on that. And the lenders, also equity investors, maybe you will agree with this, Ted, they need to see all the sustainability down to the mine when it comes to critical raw material. So that was something that we put enormous time in from the beginning, even before the off-takers. When we start working with the automotives in Germany on this, we worked on the raw material supply chain early. So I think that to bring both sides in, not only the off-takers, but don't forget this about the supply chain, because that takes time.
Yeah, I think it's a very fair point, and they do go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Let's move along to this. So yeah, same question. What are we seeing here in the video in the background?
Well, so this is actually not ours, Heart Aerospace hybrid electric airplane that will come into commercial aviation and commercial traffic in the end of this decade, before the end of this decade. And it's a hybrid electric based on batteries, electric motors, and it's under construction right now. So we're still in the development period.
That's beautiful. And let's do this.
Yeah.
Let's do the same thing here. I mean, this is the product disruption brick.
Yeah.
Per definition, this brick is for companies creating, assembling green products, such as aircraft, equipment, and gadget transport vehicles. And let's do the same thing here. Let's look at the various considerations. So it says, as a founder, you should show market existence early on and prove technological readiness, for instance, through prototyping or a demo. You should establish IP moats through patents or process design, form partnerships, and secure high-quality, reliable supply chain with potential for vertical integration. What do you say when I just said that?
I agree with all of this. I think there should be because the problem, as I have learned, my experience with new product is that the investors, they have problems sometimes, challenges sometimes to validate the technical risk with this. And I think that the unlock for financial investor is to have the strategic investors on the same cap table. They want to be in the same boat as someone that actually can verify the technical risk in these companies. So form partnership is extremely important. It's also with new products that there is not a supply chain established. So you actually need to both find the new upcoming startups that want to be part of this, which could be a scenario where you compound risk on risk when you go with startups, because you don't know their fundraising strategy going forward, but also start working with the existing supply chain and the conventional suppliers in how they could support and sort of lean in towards the new production, or the new product. And that can take time, because if you look at aerospace, for example, it's a very traditional and conservative supply chain. And they are not, they're not jumping on new opportunities like this. They want to know that this is going to work out. And we had to spend a lot of time to prove ourselves with existing suppliers to the conventional aerospace industry to really get them to take a bet on going with us on this. Then I would like one thing more to add, and that is to have a really clear picture because many of these products, it takes very long time during R&D. When you're not building any factories that you could pledge, you're not building anything. And to fund R&D, it's both expensive and it's fairly difficult to find non-dilutive and I mean, you can't have debt financing on R&D. It's very difficult, at least. So have a clear picture on how you're going to fund yourself all the way up to debt financing, and do it in a reasonable way. I was actually sitting on this event I talked about in Copenhagen when one of the VCs stood up and said, like, because everyone is talking about that the VCs need to take more technical risk, but then he raised his hand and said, absolutely, but the founders and the companies, they also have a responsibility to show how they're going to make this happen. And I think that was a very viable comment, because we as startup people, sometimes it's so easy to, I mean, like, we're going to figure this out. We're so under pressure all the time. We just want to get the B round done or the A round, and we will figuring out everything else later. But to really, from the day one, to have a very clear path, how are you going to fund yourself through your development period, that needs to be crystal clear for an investor. Otherwise, I think it's going to be super difficult to find the financing. One last thing, TRL. Always keep your eyes on the product. I mean, it's not about the execution of the factory or anything else. It's really when you get to a C round, the investors will request you, very likely, that you have a TRL up to 6, 7 something.
Yeah.
That takes time. And if you don't get there, you're going to have a problem when you come to a C round, because there's going to be too much gap in valuation and TRL. So really make sure that you are closing the gap between your valuation and your TRL. The TRL is the technical readiness, and that you have them sort of aligned all through your development. I would say that's extremely important.
So on the first point, I completely agree. On the first point, I guess it's about already from the beginning thinking through the clear milestones, in a way, the fundable milestones along the way, and of course put the development of the project first. But in some cases, you might have to do things in a slightly different order in order to attract the capital, to be able to show progress. And one thing I hear when supporting Heart Aerospace, for instance, in further fundraising, is that sometimes investors feel that, okay, what's the difference now from the previous round? It's like, okay, why is it more expensive now when I could have gone in the previous round? So I think it's that kind of like very clearly demonstrate progress in essence. For Heart Aerospace, on this brick here, when did you join?
Between Series A and B.
So here somewhere. Let's see here. Yes, I think this one kind of fits pretty well. I think the Series A of Heart Aerospace, how big was that? Like around 50 or something?
Bigger. I mean, we did it in tranches also. Do you remember? Yeah. We did that. But I think that since this is a very complicated product, we didn't establish our supply chain until after Series A. So we were able to, Anders, the CEO and founder, he was able to raise the Series A even without the supply chain. Sort of. I mean, he did some early, really good work on the electric motor, which is a critical component for building this product. But then it was really between Series A and Series B that we established the supply chain and the partners that we did partner up with for going further in the development. So this is, I mean, it's always changing a little bit from cases to cases, I would say.
If you expand the horizon a bit from aerospace as a case and look at this brick as a whole, one of my main insights is around the supply chain. That as a startup, I mean, I guess there are two ways to go about. It's either thinking about this as kind of like a modular assembly type case, that you're tapping into an existing supply chain and you are buying and assembling components. That's one way of looking at it. And as a startup, I guess you have to do that to some extent. But then there's of course also the case for vertical integration, where you have some of the real like champion, like pioneers in this under this brick have done it really well, where they don't really rely on anyone else. So they take the critical components or the critical pieces of the product, and they do them themselves. For many cases out there, we've seen examples of companies relying too much on startups in the supply chain, and when a startup, like a battery company or whatever it might be, when they are having tough times, that kind of impacts the company. At the same time, getting kind of a great deal with an existing supplier from kind of the legacy or incumbent world can also be very hard, because you're a startup. Like, why would you prioritize a startup over if it's an OEM in aerospace or in automotive or trucking or whatever it might be? How should one think around that, do you think?
I think you are really putting the head on, like, this is exactly the problem. And there is a fine line and a blend that I think needs to be applied. Because if you put everything on suppliers, you won't really own any of your, the IP yourself. And you can really question, what is the value of a company like Heart Aerospace if you don't have any of the IP yourself? And you could also question why someone else, for example, if you're looking at an electric motor, why would someone else do it better than we? We know exactly the configuration of this and how we can maximize the efficiency of this aircraft. Why don't we do the development ourselves? So I think that there are, always in the product, I assume there are things that are novel technology, that is the core technology company, and there is everything else that needs to go into a new product that is maybe not so novel. If you take the example with an aircraft, you can think about the landing gears, for example. It's not novel technology. Why would you spend time in developing landing gear yourself? Why don't you go to a supplier that knows how to do landing gear? But when it comes to the propulsion line, which is the core technology of Heart Aerospace and similar with other eVTOLs and other aircrafts, why don't you focus on the hybrid system, making sure that you secure and take really big land grab of that IP yourself in the battery management system, in the electric motor, and securing that. So I think they really need to be a mix, because also if you at one point in time you want to achieve some debt financing, it's going to be tough if you're doing everything yourself and if you're relying too much of other like-minded startups, because it's really compounding risk and risk. So bring in a little bit of the old industry, make them be part of you, potentially maybe on your cap table, so they have really some skin in the game, but then and sort of de-risking the program with that, but then also securing IP for the value of the company. Because I know, Ted, we had a lot of discussions with this in the board when you were on it, like, one thing that we could also give the investors, if that, let's say if worst come to worst, that this is not going to work out, at least we have this IP, we can sell this IP to someone else. And that's a good argument for a company always to say, like, okay, maybe we don't get all the way to an IPO with this company, because you never know what the future looks like. But if you secure IP that is really valuable, you can always, sell IP. And that doesn't really apply only to Heart, but to every company. So I think that's also giving comfort to investors that they will get their money back in some way.
From IP to IPO, it's just one letter. Deal. And now we've been talking a lot about the Critical Unlock 2 and Critical Unlock 3 here. The first one is around to kind of gauge the market and get some kind of non-binding LOIs in from the beginning. It will help with fundraising. We have 3 more minutes on the set out time. We might run over with a couple of minutes, but for the ones that have to run, maybe let's open up for Q&A. And we've gotten one question already, and that question is: will the presentation be made available after the call, please? And you can already now go to the Climate Brick website and download the bricks and also the cover page. If you also want the slide with the picture, Sofia, I'm sure you can Google that with Google image search. Do we have any other questions? We have 48 people. We had a peak of 53. We're down to 48, so we got to kind of up the game here a bit. No, but do we have any other questions? Otherwise, we can continue talking about the actual brick. Let's continue talking about the brick and see if questions come in. And please ask questions and use the Q&A tool in Zoom. I think maybe let's zoom in a bit on the power dynamics in between the supply chain and you as a startup. Or actually, we got a question. Let's do that one first. It's more fun to give the opportunity to other people. So Irene Anton, she's asking, any advice from super early stage founders in any of these paths? How to become a part of this journey if you don't have a pure tech background? Sofia, you don't have a pure tech background.
No, you need to partner up. And I mean, if you are a tech company, you really need to find a really good CTO that knows the technology. And, you know, otherwise, I think it will be difficult to be credible in the startup environment.
Beautiful. I would absolutely agree. I think that that is a good that's a good point. Next, so let's hear Florian. He is in here as a speaker. Florian, what do you
I think I pushed the wrong button. Sorry. Yeah, I have a question because we are starting to do offtake agreements, or we want to do offtake agreements because we already sold our first pilot, and we will go to the Hamburg Wind Energy because we are producing airborne wind energy converters. And my question is there a model for having some sort of public guarantees for the customer who is willing to sign offtake agreements, where we don't want to promise too much, but to get the money really quick, which we did with a pilot customer that we had.
I didn't really understand the question. The question is...
The question is, how can we put some a bit of a risk from the customer to public guarantees? Is there a model for that? Are there public guarantees that we can...
Yeah, I mean, it depends on, I'm not an expert on public guarantees, but what we used at Northvolt, and I think also would be a viable option for Heart Aerospace in the future, is really the ECAs. And I think they are underused because they're so complicated to work with. But depending on, I mean, for example, if we take the Northvolt case, the German, since the offtake agreements were with German customers, the German ECA called Euler Hermes, they actually guaranteed a large part of the financing backed on those offtake agreements. So really early establish good contacts with the ECAs, understanding how you can use that tool because it's available for that purposes, for exporting. Or but it really takes expertise. So I would advise, if that would be the case, you probably need to get some advice on how to work with ECAs because they are very policy driven and they are completely inflexible. But a very, very, very good tool, fantastic. And it's so underused, unfortunately.
Can you spell the tool again, please?
The ECAs, the export credit agencies. And in German, it sounds like maybe you're German. It's the Euler Hermes, that is the German ones. I loved working with them, even inflexible they are. Yeah, how inflexible they are. They were the one, they made us happen, I would say. Absolutely.
That's beautiful. We have a question from Laimonas Norika. Could you please share more around offtake agreements? I mean, we are talking about that now, but is there anything else you'd like to double click on around offtake agreements?
I think when it comes to offtake agreements, there is so much creativity and engineering that can also be made into the offtake agreements. And this is really how you are figuring and planning your fundraising all the way up to revenue based. You need to maybe get offtake agreements that are legally binding at an earlier stage. And that is challenging with a new product and with gigascaling, because you basically need to get the money in before you actually have a product. And I think that we at Northvolt was extremely creative in doing so, because we sold a lot of batteries on take-or-pay contracts even before we had the batteries. And we had we engaged in early stage technical advisors on the lender side, and we had really clear gates on how we would go into the next level of the offtake agreement. But good offtake agreements, but always to remember that there is always a risk with offtake agreements. I mean, there's always a risk that you as a company are taking on more liability than what you can actually show. I mean, like what you can actually execute on. And then it becomes a too large risk. So I would say that you need to find a balance. I mean, at Northvolt, at some point, we were so high on our offtake agreements. We just wanted to sell more and more and more because so much customers. And in the end, we were like, the lenders starting to see that we actually oversold our capacity. And then we have to hold back and say like, okay, good. So that's the limit. We just need to sell what we actually can produce. I mean, now I'm joking a little bit about it, but it's also a risk that you get if the demand is really high, that you sell more. So you need to have good liabilities, and you need to have bankable contracts, and you need to take your own liabilities into account also, so that the liability that the customer put on you doesn't put you in bankruptcy in the case you go into delay, or for example. Sorry, that
we
was
have a question. We have a question on this from Etienne as well, around kind of, maybe chewing too much in the beginning of the Northvolt journey and now having to kind of navigate.
And yeah, okay. I don't need to reply to that, but I mean, there is very good clauses in this agreement on how to handle this, and it's not going to be a problem for Northvolt with the BMW agreement.
We have another question from Vyacheslav, who is asking: is having IP absolutely necessary? Is it in any way Is it in any way of teaching someone skilled in art to go around what has been invented and disclosed already? Is having IP absolutely necessary?
No. I mean, I don't think so. I mean, IP could be, first of all, IP is not only patents. Sometimes you don't want to just to patent your technology, because a lot can be in your process on how you are doing things rather than something, and then you want to keep it as trade secrets, as a knowledge that only you and the company have access to. Yeah. So I think it could be, if there is a skill of how to run a machine or how to create, you know, like a mix of things, it's better to not patent it. It's better to keep it as a trade secret. But an IP strategy, it's always good to have, I would say. Yeah.
No, makes all the sense in the world. We have one last question from Adam Slater. He's saying, we are in a pre-revenue stage. Should we prioritize pushing TRL level or do an early customer pilot with our early prototype level product discounted? What route would you think is the preferred one here?
For investors, this is to you, Ted.
For investors, it's to me. Okay. Yeah. Gotcha. That is tough. If it's on the earlier stage of things, I mean, us investors do not have the best imagination. So the more concretely you can present what you want to build, the better. And I think if you have come with something that is packaged as something where you can help me with that's very good. At the same time, if I'm thinking back at the early stages of the Heart Aerospace journey, the fact that they had those LOIs, even though we of course understood that this was very far from binding contracts, it also means something. So as a founder, you should go out and get a lot of feedback early. But if I would have to pick, and this might be my personal preference, I would say go for a prototype in the earlier phases. Then you also should have some type of LOI or
but I also think they're very linked, because you're probably going to need a pilot, depending on what product they're doing. They're probably going to need a pilot to validate the TRL. It's very difficult to get up to a 6 or 7 without having a pilot and actually producing it. Could be, at least. I don't know what product they're doing. So I think that having a pilot where you can demonstrate your technology, it's going to help the TRL to increase, probably. I think so.
Beautiful. We are running out of time, so I would like to start with thanking you, Sofia, who now on my screen is called Rubina, which is a bit weird. But huge thanks. This was really cool, I think. Also learnings on the technical side, and I know now we try to cover 2 bricks in one because of your background, but maybe that meant that we couldn't go deep enough. But let's keep this conversation going. A big round of applause. No one can see the now 38 people applauding, but you can see me applauding here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before leaving you, just a few more words. Please go to climatebrick.com. We have an open letter there that you can sign. You can give feedback on these bricks. We went through them to some extent now. We would also love, like, if you use the Climate Brick to plot in your own journeys, share that with us. and come to or host an event. We're trying to be at all the major ClimateTech meetups in Europe. So with that, a huge thanks.
Thanks to everyone listening. This is fun. Let's talk more about this.
Let's do it. Does the real Rubina want to say something before we break? If so, you have 10 seconds.
Just thank you all guys for joining, and thanking Ted and Sofia for being there. And sorry again, this is all on that we had all this technical challenges. So thank you for the patience, also for the participants to wait almost 15 minutes. So thank you guys. It was great to have you there, Ted and Sofia, and have a good day. And also, I think if there are more questions, you can reach Ted and Sofia all the time, and obviously me also. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.